Thank you, David. To turning on videos, I'm really hoping, since it did end up being a slightly smaller group, I'm hopeful that we can have, a nice lively conversation and get some great input. So, as we get into things, David is going to be sharing a screen, which makes it a little harder for us to see each other, but I thought maybe we can kind of do a little back and forth to make sure we're having that connection too. So, and on Shotki, if you want to, would love to see your shining faces as well. So I'm Heather Hines, for those of you who don't know me, haven't met me before. I'm the Interim Community Development Director for the city. Really pleased to be here tonight to have this conversation and really get some input from you to add to our conversation. So I will be as informal as we can if we're all respecting each other's, ability to speak and input, and giving each other all the floor to participate. Would love to have this more informal conversation given the size, and be able to just kind of input and maybe raise your hand if you're having a hard time breaking in. But that would be my preference, is to really turn it more into a dialogue. So I also want to just point out that we do have Veronica Tam, who is the housing consultant specifically as part of the team, and she's going to be kind of roaming the different group. So if there's something you ask me and I don't know the answer, I can try to text her and have her drop in and see if she can address it. So, that's a wonderful resource, but she can't be in all three rooms at one time. So we'll ask her to join us if we have specific questions. So as Ron said, we've got kind of two conversations that we really wanted to get input on. Actually, can we just take a moment to introduce ourselves? I introduced myself, but I would love to, some of you are newer faces for me, so I'd love to just have everybody go around and introduce yourself, and maybe, if you have a certain affiliation or a certain reason you came tonight that you want to share with the group, would love to hear that. So let's see, David, do you want to, you've kind of already, but.
Yeah, I'm David Garcia. I'm an associate planner for the city of Petaluma. I am super passionate about housing, so I'm really just honored to have this opportunity to be working on the housing element and working with Heather and Olivia and many of our other colleagues in the planning department, and most of all, to be here with you. So thank you, and I'm going to tap Caleb.
Oh, yeah, I'm already unmuted. Hi, everyone. You just call me Cal, it's easy to remember. But my name is Cal Weeks. I'm the policy director with Generation Housing. Also, as the name might suggest, involved in housing and very passionate about it, and mostly just here to hear some local folks' thoughts and opinions about how we should shape Petaluma, and where where necessary, I can feed in some of my own perspectives. And with that, I'll give it to Margaret, so I know her.
Hey, Cal. Good to see you. I might not have ever seen you before, albeit virtual. Just a heads up, I got a 3-year-old who's eating dinner, and I just ran away from him, but that's why my video goes on and off. Anyway, my name's Margaret DiMatteo. My pronouns are she, her. I am the housing policy attorney at Legal Aid of Sonoma County. I'm here because I'm super interested, obviously, in housing. I did eviction defense and tenant representation for most of my career in San Francisco, and I'm kind of new to Sonoma County. I've been here since September of last year. And, it's strange to me to be in a place that doesn't have as many tenant-friendly policies or accessibility for lots of different groups. So I'm actually really excited from what I've seen so far from Petaluma's housing element plan, and just the way you guys have been presenting information so far. I'm on a housing element working group for the whole Bay Area, and I don't feel like I'm gonna have to chime in too much here. It seems like you guys have this pretty well, but I'm here. I'm happy to be here. And with that, I will pass to, I'm not sure, let's see. Don, who I also know but have never seen.
And I'm sorry because I'm not set up to share video tonight. I'm Don Cohn. I'm with Petaluma People's Services, Fair Housing of Sonoma County. And I'm just dropping in to monitor the situation, basically. I'm a fair housing specialist and investigation coordinator.
Great, thanks, Don. Anne, let's go to you.
Hi, everybody. Ann Edminster. I'm a relative newcomer to Petaluma. I've been here 2.5 years. I'm chairing the Climate Action Commission right now. And my background, I'm educated as an architect, but I have managed to escape legitimacy in that world. And instead, I'm a green building consultant. I've also been a planning commissioner in the past, and in my architecture study and practice, I've only ever been interested in housing. Other building types don't hold any interest for me at all.
Okay, let's see. Stephen.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, my name is Stephen Bosonic. I've lived in Petaluma since about 1990. And I've become involved in more of the general housing issues after becoming quite concerned about some of the development that's going on in town that's impacting open space and some of the environmental issues that these new developments are impacting the city with, the river, elimination of oak trees, all types of things like that. So I'm kind of coming from that point of view, but then started looking at all the development going on in town. And actually last weekend, I spent the weekend just driving around to almost every new large development that's going on in town just to see. I was just shocked. Some of it is like out of sight from my normal routines. It's like, whoa, that is going on here, which some of it is really good, I think. And then some of it is, concerning to me also. So that's why I'm here tonight.
Thank you. And then Shakti, am I saying that right?
Yeah, it's actually my wife's name.
Yes.
My name is Darren. This is Shakti.
Hi.
Shakti, born and raised in Petaluma. Parents still live here, lived here for 50 years. So my father-in-law is 90 years old now, hard to believe, still living on the west side. We just bought a house in the last 12 months here on the west side of Petaluma. So, we're kind of flipping from being renters for a long time, and both of us have moved around to a lot of different places, to now being homeowners. So I think we can kind of see both sides of that coin. And then kind of policy wise, I'm always really interested. I kind of resonate with what the last gentleman was talking about in terms of, I think we all get a knee-jerk reaction to any new development and concern over environmental impacts and things like that. And I think, increasingly there's a conversation around density, and someone put it really well the other day. There's kind of a colloquial term that means kind of more people in a space, but not necessarily all on top of each other, suffocating each other. So I'm interested in finding that balance, and then, what policies there are that can kind of maximize existing inventory. My ears peaked up talking about, loosening restrictions around ADUs, maybe remodels or expansions on housing to accommodate more people. I love ideas like that, but yeah, just we're excited to be part of the conversation and hear and learn.
Great, thank you. I'm excited to move into our first topic because it's playing into much of what people are saying. So Olivia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Olivia Urban. I'm a principal environmental planner. I have been working in Petaluma for 8 years, and it is amazing to see the change that's happened in that time, and super excited to be part of this housing element cycle that will set the stage for what we see in the next 8 years to come. So, and I'm note taker tonight, so I'm going to be capturing all the good thoughts and input that folks share.
Thank you. And last but not least, Kelsey.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelsey Hubbard. I'm a senior planner with the city of Petaluma, and just echoing all the excitement and appreciation towards you guys. Just really excited to have this conversation and looking forward to diving in and hearing your thoughts. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kelsey. Okay, so I'm going to kick it off with our first topic, and that's really building height. And so one of the reasons we thought this was a good topic to get feedback on is one of the things we have heard through all of our outreach is, you know, stay away from the river, don't, you know, remove trees, stay away from the urban growth boundaries, centralized development. And so one of the things we've really been looking at is along corridors in the center of town. So some of those main thoroughfares. And one of the things, we have certain housing numbers that were given from the state, and we have to figure out how to accommodate them. So one of the things that happens when you know, when you say, don't put it here, and let's leave this along, you know, along the river, let's not develop here, and it's kind of like we have to figure out where the housing goes. So one of the things we wanted to get input on is where might it be appropriate to look for more intensity or density in the city? Where does it feel like, okay, that might be a good place to build taller, to increase density? So this reference material that you're seeing up on your screen, the map, really the first thing we did is we looked at the city and we looked at what are allowable heights currently under our current code, because this is one of the things we often hear. If there's a way to zoom that a little bit, David, that would be great. David, is that you sharing?
Actually, Olivia is,
Olivia.
is
Okay.
sharing screen.
That's a little bit better.
Notes.
Thank you, Olivia. So we looked at the city and we said, okay, so what do our existing regulations say, right? So we kind of, this is a little bit of a generalization because oftentimes it says things like 30 feet, you know, and so we've translated this the best we could for this exercise into the number of stories. So you'll see the darker areas at the center of town typically allow higher building heights, the pink being that you see through much of it being 2 stories. So this was kind of a starting point for us in terms of looking at what existing regulations are. And then if we scroll down a little bit, we also, we pulled a few images just to kind of give some context to what are these heights? What are some of the things that either are existing in terms of, you know, the granary silos or, you know, the church spires versus some of the things that like 25 Western is about 3 stories, just to try to give you a little bit of a sense for this discussion. And then what we did was we identified some different areas of the city to really get your input on specific areas. So we're going to run through these, would love, you know, some input from people, starting with the area around the downtown smart station. This is an area that typically allows somewhere between 2 to 6 stories allowed. And this is the area that really we hear a lot from the community that this is one of those areas. Let's put housing here. It's close to transit. It's not a greenfield. It's close to services. It's got more walkable, bikeable opportunities. So this is an area that 2 to 6 stories are allowed currently. Would love to hear some input. Is this appropriate? Is this an area where maybe taller buildings are appropriate? Is this an area that would be the right place to see increase, or is it good the way it is and you wouldn't want to see anything higher than 6 stories? 6 stories are a little bit hard to talk about in this area because we don't have it yet. I would say the North River Apartments project that's under construction at Oak and the Petaluma Boulevard North, that I believe is maybe 4. They might have a 5-story component on that at one of the elevations, but just as a kind of a reference tool. Anne.
So there are entire dense European cities that really don't go above 6 stories by and large. I'm curious why we would even contemplate that when, I don't know, I'll eat my hat if we can't meet our goals at 6 or less.
And I don't have that we can't meet our goals at 6 or less. We're just trying to get a gauge from people in terms of, are there certain areas that you think that we should be really looking for more? So what I take your comment is that probably 2 to 6 is totally adequate here.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure 2 is enough, but
Okay.
so one of the lenses that I bring to this is I've done quite a bit of research on the embodied carbon cost of building at different scales. And a sweet spot is somewhere around 4 to 6 stories. So if you go much lower than that, generally you're chewing up too much land for the amount of housing you're creating. And if you go much higher than that, you're starting to incur higher and higher carbon emissions as a result of changes in the structural system, the necessity of doing mechanical vertical transportation, elevators, and all the infrastructure that goes into building cores at those heights. So I feel pretty strongly, very strongly about not going higher than 6, but I think 3 to 6 is where we should be looking.
Okay, great. That's great input, Anne. Thank you. So I put that down. I don't know if you got that, Olivia, embodied carbon cost, consider embodied carbon costs, and that 4 to 6 stories is really the sweet spot. Yep. Okay, you got it. Stephen.
Yes, well, Anne already changed my mind on something, giving me her input on the European cities and all that. And I don't know that at all, but I can kind of picture it. But I was going to say, why stop at 6? I mean, I'm looking out 30, 40, 50 years. Petaluma is going to be a city, a very large city. So why not look at what's needed for the next 30, 40 years instead of saying, well, let's do 3 now. Gee, what are we going to do in 15 years? We should have built 5. So that's where I'm thinking. And the areas that you're pointing to right now, I think are perfect for the multi-story 2 to 6. Absolutely. That's where we should be going. And any part of town that's zoned urban, whether it's urban core or urban general or whatever, I think are really candidates for multi-story homes.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have a comment specifically on this area?
Well,
yeah, I'll chime in. Oh, sorry, Shakti.
Well, just more broadly, I think that a really good point was just raised. Gentleman just saying, I see Petaluma as a huge city, and I think that's a core part of the vision too. Is is this what is the future of the town look like? Could kind of play into these discussions, because I hear what he's saying. If we're going to be a metropolis, should we kind of build to that scale already? And I'm sure many of you guys are kind of have heard of Chuck Marone and strong towns and all that kind of thing. And I love some of that ideology, which kind of says the opposite, which says, hey, don't build like you're going to be a huge metropolis when you're not yet. Let it kind of go there organically, and instead reduce building regulations to changing existing inventory so you can kind of accommodate that growth organically instead of build the skyscrapers and they will come. But in regards to the specific area, 4 stories, I think seems right. I know my wife is like, don't do anything over one story, but I think we're the point of this exercise is to talk about, you know, how to maximize inventory in kind of a scenario to meet these regulations. So that you know, feels right to us.
Yeah, and that's part of that kind of conversation, the broader conversation about the vision, the long-term vision of the character of Petaluma, I think is part of what that plays into as well. Thank you. Cal?
Yeah, Ann's point is certainly well taken. And also kind of, I think, you know, dovetailing off of that, I think, and don't quote me on this because I'm certainly not an actual developer myself, but as I understand it, there's a certain point in terms of height, especially when it comes to using different materials, where the costs increase significantly. So there isn't really an in-between in terms of building. It's either you build, you know, 4 to 6 stories or less, or 1 to 6 stories, whatever, or you go up to, you know, 14 plus. That's as I understand it. In terms of where, you know, the housing should be built, and especially as it, you know, pertains to the smart properties, we should maximize as much as possible. I'm personally, you know, fine with 6 stories being there, but we want to squeeze every possible unit we can, because I do think Petaluma is going to be a thriving city in the next 20 years, and I think we need to be prepared, especially to support the transit and really feed into the smart train and make this a little bit more sustainable, because currently the smart train is, as I'm sure everyone is aware, took a pretty big hit during obviously COVID, as everyone else did, and so it's just about long-term planning.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a general 2 cents for now.
Thank you. So I'm already getting, I don't know if you guys are seeing that we're already through half our time, which I don't know how that's possible. So quickly, and maybe what we'll do is show what other corridors that we were talking about on these graphics. And then if there's 1 or 2 that people feel more drawn to. So we had the Corona Smart Station, the second Smart Station, which currently has about a 2-story limit. What were the other areas? The Washington corridor, which is also about a 2-story limit currently, and then segments of McDowell range from 2 to 3 stories, and segments of Petaluma Boulevard that range from 2 to 4 stories. So I don't know. Oh, and Boulevard South 3 to 4 stories. So is there any in there that people feel particularly drawn to? I don't think I think we're going to run out of time to talk about programs if we, but I want to make sure to hear from people. Yes, Anne.
I think all of those corridors that are major thoroughfares can really carry 3, 4 and up. I mean, I can't see any reason to limit them to 2-story. That all that does is perpetuate the sprawl.
Yeah. And, you know, I think this one on East Washington is a good, like, looking at some of the stuff out there. It's very, you know, it's not a lot of housing along the Washington corridor, but the built environment is kind of that very low intensity suburban development pattern.
It's kind of the no there problem.
Yeah.
Right. You know, it's like you have no idea what's going on there. It's like, it's not a place to be, it's a place to get through.
Right. Yeah. So note takers, maybe if there's a way to capture the comment kind of 3, 4 and up on all the major corridors, I think is what I heard from Anne across those. And Stephen, did you have something? Your hand went up and then went down?
Yeah, I was going to say I agreed with Ann, and particularly for the Corona Smart Station, I think any kind of station like that where we have transportation is definitely viable for the higher end stories of buildings. That was really what I was going to say.
Yeah, this was very eye-opening to see some of the areas where we have such low height limits along kind of
Yes.
the key areas that people are saying, if you're going to be building, let's build along these key areas. And then you look at what our codes say are allowed to go there, and they don't match up. Shotki, and I've forgotten your name. Can you remind me of your name?
Sure, it's Darren. And then
Darren.
some of the city council meetings, it's Rackusen, or as Patrick calls it, recusant.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, I just put it together. Hi, Darren.
The one that stood out to me is McDowell. Just looking at the map there, it looked like it was almost all blue, and then this tiny area, or not tiny, but this corridor of like not allowing over 2 stories. McDowell, that one definitely seems kind of yeah, right in there. You can see that blue area of
Yeah.
kind of higher height, and then suddenly there's an area that's not, and it just kind of doesn't seem to fit.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Okay, anything burning comments that anyone wants to add to this general conversation before we move to talking about kind of programs, policy concepts?
I have a
Well-
last, or go ahead.
My only thing was just when we talk about, making it near municipal transit stations, I love the idea of kind of coupling this with some kind of development that kind of makes transit stations more accessible as kind of transit hubs. And this is something someone threw my way as kind of an idea in some cities where they're integrating kind of biking stations and different things to maybe some of these smart stations. And just in this broader conversation of like, yeah, maximize the space around this transit, turn the smart train into something useful. I don't know if they totally marry together, but basically, how do you make that smart station also usable for other modes of transit, maybe enhance that utility and make those kind of nice nexus points?
And I don't know if you've heard this, Darren, but we do have e-bike hubs coming. And one of them is right at the smart station. We have the first, I think it might be the first 7 hubs coming as kind of the pilot program, and one is at the station. So super exciting. David.
I was just going to prompt to see if anyone had feedback on downtown and building heights. I know this, we've heard some general feedback, but again, anything on downtown that anyone would like to share, and if not, we can move on to programs and policies.
Thank you. Downtown is kind of a special location, right? Because it is our historic district and really our center of some amazing buildings. Darren.
Yeah, just historic Charmville. I would love to see that kind of stay the way it is. American graffiti.
Thank you. Anne?
Yeah, I think it is a more sensitive area. And I guess my reaction is that the watchword for downtown should probably be variety. In other words, I think because we've got a lot of variety there now, from 1 story to maybe 4-ish. I guess Petaluma Hotel is maybe around 4 or 5. And so I think that what would really support maintaining the character is to continue to have a lot of variety in the heights. And
not have something look all the same.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's going to be a little bit tricky, and how do you do that? I'm not sure what the mechanism would be, but I think it's important. So I think it could sustain, say, 6 stories in some locations, but I'd really hate to see everything go to 6.
Yeah.
At the same time, we can definitely go up to 3, 4 easily in some locations.
And you don't want it to look like DC. It's such a wonderful look.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do enjoy DC, but no.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that input. And I hope that, the locations we picked seem to really fit with the direction from community so far on where to put housing. So now we wanted to kind of get to the conversation about housing priorities and strategies to help Petaluma reach its housing goals. So this box, the kind of, I don't, yes, thank you, that, I don't even know what color that is, beige box there. It covers some of the things that you saw in a previous slide, really the feedback we have gotten so far from the community on housing. And sometimes the questions weren't specifically about housing, but these are things that came up that relate to housing and that we want to keep tracking and keep kind of like, this is what we've heard so far. Let's add to what we've heard so far. We're not starting the conversation completely over, but continuing to add to it. And so then as we scroll over, these are the boxes that we put the different categories of programs, and it shows both current existing programs from our housing element that we're currently in, our 5th cycle housing element, and then really some of the ideas that we've been brainstorming. And as staff, we have kind of really how we've put it to our housing consultants is we support affordable housing, and we, you know, give us ideas, give us tools, give us resources. How should we be thinking about this differently? What should we be thinking about? What should we be prioritizing? So the list in purple, these are not done deals. These are like some of the ideas that have come up. There's some of the brainstorming we've had so far, and really an opportunity now for input from you all about, you know, either ideas for how to look at it, things that you think really take front precedence with some of these topics. And we can kind of move throughout this board. I don't want to take you through anti-displacement if you really want to be talking about homelessness or vice versa. So anybody want to just kind of jump in? Darren?
Yeah, and a big issue for me that isn't necessarily on here, but kind of goes along with a lot of this, is these ideas of food deserts. You know, there's some overlays. I wish we could have some of those great overlays. The gentleman from Ramey and Associates was going through, including one was like healthy food access and tree canopies. And I love to see that stuff. Maybe that's kind of mixed with a broader effort to eliminate some of those gaps, because there were obvious disparities. But when we talk about the affordable housing, you know, sometimes that gets put in a stack and pack unit kind of on its own. And at best, you know, there's maybe like a convenience store or something nearby. But if the affordable housing is somehow coupled with, you know, maybe some radius to some kind of healthier or broader food option, like at least your traditional grocery store, or maybe this moves to a model where, you know, some of these developments get coupled with that kind of infrastructure. Because a lot of people I know, we talk about walkability as well. And, you know, it seems like kind of mixing some of that use to where people have the things at hand closer to where they live. Could really apply to any development, but I think when we talk about, you know, any kind of rent controlled or affordable development, I would love to see that really be a strong point of planning. So it's not like, yeah, it's affordable and rent controlled, but you're also kind of staffed to the side and there's nothing nearby.
Yeah, and note takers, I think there were some also just like other, some of those colorful, just other ideas. Yeah, great. Just if it's not falling into one specific of these kind of buckets, let's just put it on that other ideas. Great, thank you. Margaret.
I'm gonna show my face again. I think now is a really opportune time, considering that the city council just voted to make just cause and tenant protection ordinance a priority, top 10 priority. There's a lot of advocacy on behalf of numerous organizations to promote that. And that's in part because Petaluma and Sonoma County in general are, you know, in this housing crisis that you've already identified, you know, a lot of reasons for. But one cool thing about it, about Just Cause, is that it is an element of housing element. It can be an element. It's preserving existing housing. And anti-displacement is also part of housing element. So the fact that, you know, these already major lists, you know, makes me really happy. Other jurisdictions, those words don't even come up. And the whole point of housing element and the RENA numbers is to address, you know, a series of wrongs that have been done over time through zoning and redlining. And, you know, we're not a diverse community. Petaluma is not a diverse place to live. I think the percentage of foreign-born residents actually went down in Petaluma and Healdsburg, whereas it's going up in just about every other area. And so I'm all for tenant anti-displacement measures, tenants' right to, you know, TOPA, COPA is big in the conversation right now. The tenant opportunity to purchase, trying to give tenants the opportunity to create, you know, to have the opportunity to purchase a home in a place where it's, you know, pretty much completely unaffordable. Those kind of measures are really important. So I definitely support those. The other things I saw up there were like tenant advisory board. One thing that would come hand in hand with an ordinance, a tenant protection ordinance, would be a rental registry. And I think that is probably, nobody talks about it, but it's one of the most important things for having the data that we need in order to figure out what is even going on with rental housing in Petaluma and Sonoma County in general. So a rental registry is an element of, you know, any kind of tenant protection ordinance where a landlord would be required to register their rental unit with the city, and there would be some kind of oversight board that would, you know, enforce or, you know, have the tenant protection ordinance. They would have to oversee it and enforce it. But it would also be a source of great data for a place that is going to increase and become a large city eventually in the next, you know, the long-term vision of Petaluma. So sorry to go on and on.
Thank you, Margaret. So we have about 4 minutes. So Anne, and then I saw Stephen's hand. So maybe Anne, some comments, and then see if we can see if Stephen has anything to add.
I'll try to talk fast. I guess looking through the climate lens, what I would say first and foremost, I mean, great comments, Margaret. Wholeheartedly agree with all of them. It's great to have your expertise. But one thing, we should only be building the housing that's absolutely needed, because construction itself has a tremendously high environmental cost. So we shouldn't be building above market housing that we don't need. We should be building only the housing that we need for those in greatest need. And this means that we have two needs. One is really, really targeted policies. For example, we need some sort of carbon budget that's allocated based on the priority for the housing that's needed. And secondly, we need a public housing entity, because one of the reasons that we chronically end up with more housing that's market rate than affordable, like we'll never hit our numbers the way that goes, because it's so expensive to build that way. And so we're always getting a tiny fraction, you know, get 60, you know, a 60 unit project and you get 9 housing units, right? It's like, that's not the ratio we need. And the reason we're not there is because we don't have a public agency that's doing it, where the financial equation is changed. So all of the successful projects that we look at where they've achieved a very, very high fraction of affordable housing, it's been through a public developer. So that's it.
Thanks, Anne. Let's see. Stephen, did you have something you wanted to add? Saw your
Yes,
hand
if
go
I could
up.
I just wanted to express a question that I'd like to know how the city, and maybe it's the planning commission, how do you determine any limits to the development that we're going to have based on finite resources for water, sewage, infrastructure, electricity, et cetera? And who does this? Is it just the planning commission, or there are groups of departments that do this? And it's got to be a complex calculation on how this is even determined. So I'd be really interested in knowing that, because to me, that's pretty foundational to know.
Yeah, well, a lot of what Anne was saying, we don't have those policies in place to say, you know, to evaluate a project in terms of only building the housing we need, right? It's very much market driven, and
Yeah.
similarly, you know, our inclusionary housing, as Anne also mentioned, is based on a percentage of the market rate. So the way that our system is set up for housing to get a 15% of the market rate as affordable means you're going to get so much more market rate to get the affordable you need. So Anne brings up a very good a good point with the way our existing system is. In terms of environmental review of projects, that does go under a review under the California Environmental Quality Act and the required checklists that has in terms of potentially significant impacts to different things such as transportation or hydrology or